And then just give me a minute and I'm going to go live on Facebook so that people can watch us if they don't feel like coming on. And I can also post it then afterwards.
Okay.
All right. Should tell me it's going live. Got it.
Comes the coffin.
Done. Okay, looks like we are live. So let me go back to my Zoom. See if anybody else is coming in. Okay, awesome. So people might come on to the call too. So just to kind of give you a heads up about that. And like I said, I will have this running live on Facebook. So
Okay.
and just choose not to come on live. If you guys that are on here can mute yourselves, that would be awesome, so that we don't have any feedback coming through. And then when it comes time to, if you want to ask a question, there's a little thing under reactions where you can raise your hand. So just plop your hand up there if you do have a question you want to ask. But so I wanted to introduce Becky, let her talk a little bit about herself, how she even started her business. And then I can tell you how we met. So go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I have talked to Michelle about this quite a bit ago, so I'm excited that finally able to talk to some of you about which is my passion in life, and that is to take care of perimenopausal and menopausal women. We also do men, but we'll leave that for a different conversation. We're going to stick with women tonight. I've been in women's health for 42 years. And since 1984, that's really aging me, letting you know I'm in that menopausal phase of life. And this really became an important issue to me, very honestly, when I was placed in a menopausal situation at a relatively young age. Of course, being in medicine, I used a lot of traditional medication and tried to get better. I didn't. 2.5 years, I battled insomnia, weight gain, anxiety, hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, everything that could possibly seem to go wrong. I really felt like I was just out of control, sometimes like I was losing my mind. And eventually had heard about Dr. West talking about pellet therapy, had asked me many times to try it. It was very new at that time and I was very skeptical and I didn't. So for 2.5 years, I did traditional medication. After about 2.5 years, I decided I couldn't live like I was living anymore and said, I'm going to take anything at this time. I need to feel better. I'm trying to raise children, have a career, and I really had difficulty focusing and literally just being happy. So he placed pellets in me, which I'm going to go into much greater detail to let you know what pellets are and what they do. But basically I needed hormonal balance. I had no hormones in my system at the time. Even after 2.5 years of traditional medicine, I still registered 0 in my estrogen level, very low in my testosterone levels. And he placed estrogen, testosterone pellets and changed my life in literally, for me, 8 days. Symptoms gone, became a new woman. And this became, after 25 years of doing OB and taking care of pregnant women, I changed my entire career and said this was something that needed to be out there. Women needed to be educated about perimenopause and menopause. It is the least we are ever educated is when we're perimenopause and menopause. I think they put us in that bracket. We're older, not sure how important we are to people anymore. And I was bound and determined to change that because in this world, we could live to be 100. So if we're going to live to be 100, I want to do it well. And I want you to do it well. So they changed my life, literally kind of went with Dr. West, trained with Dr. Tuter in Arizona. This became my absolute passion. And after Dr. West left and I was still at Tower Health, I decided that I wanted to do my own business. I wanted to be able to run this the way I believe that it should be run for women and eventually men. And that's where I am today. We just celebrated our 5th year as owning a business and a practice, and I'm very excited about that. And we've touched a lot of people in Berks County and many really surrounding areas. And I will work every day. Every day I meet another woman and I make her menopausal, perimenopausal life better and my days better.
So I have a question for you, if I
Sure.
interject.
Of course.
When you talked about traditional medications for 2.5 years, what were you taking?
I first, what I would never tell you to do at this point is took oral estrogen. I did that for approximately 6 months without any relief to my symptoms. After I was done taking oral medication, I tried a patch. Again, nothing. My labs didn't register anything. My levels had not changed. I was not symptom free at all. I then went to a cream base, and that didn't work for me. So the 3 of those things through that time period for me was about 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this, Becky? How many years?
18 years ago.
Okay.
So I've been using pellet therapy for 18 years.
And I would imagine in that time, there's also been a plethora of other medications that have probably come on the market. And I think that may be one of my questions for you, but
Yes, yes. And really not as much as you think.
okay.
Women's health is sadly not a big priority, and menopausal women are not a big priority. Premarin was the big medication. And as we know, when that WHI study, which we'll talk a little bit about, which I don't believe that what I do has anything to do with that study. It's a whole different ball of wax. And, so many of these things got taken off the market. People became frightened, old myths resurfaced. And, so a lot of that was taken off. So there is not a lot of options. And pharmaceutical hormone replacement therapy is very expensive. And a lot isn't covered by the insurance companies.
Yeah.
So we have some real walls that we have to tear down to have better recognition for what that we go through.
The good news that I am seeing is, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's a women's aging conference that's occurring in November in San Diego. And I've heard of others. So I do think that we are starting to be a little more loud and heard.
Absolutely.
I think there were set to be like 8 billion women in their
The largest amount of women you will ever see in history is right now.
Right. So I think now is the time where we can really start to make dramatic change and let our voices be heard. So
I agree with you.
Really important that we not sit in silence and suffer like I know many women are doing. And part of the reason is because we're just not educated in what's going on with our bodies. We're in grade school and they tell us about puberty and we know we're going to get our period. And, they teach us about that, but that's kind
right.
of where it all stops.
And it does.
Unfortunately, a lot of the OBGYNs are not really adamant. They'll just say, or I should say adamant, they're not super helpful in getting you the answers that you need. They're just going to go say, oh, you just need to diet and exercise and eat nutritious foods. Well, you know what? I did that my whole life and I hit 50 and my waistline blew up and I felt like shit. So don't tell me to, exercise and diet, because there's just not a blanket statement that you can make in that regard, that people are going to be able to go and actually take action without somebody steering them. So I think that.
Sure, because so many women just, and they do talk to their gynecologist for years, and, they get, well, you're getting older. Like you say, you have to diet, you have to exercise. And like you say, we've been told that our whole lives. Women are always fighting these things. But when you hit that wall at 50, there is hormonal reasons why you hit that wall and why you can't do anything about it. And without those hormones, this just becomes a real struggle. So it's not put all on that person. It actually is something they need help with to manage.
Exactly.
And, finally, a patient just brought attention to me about an article that he wanted to bring in and he forgot it, was going to send it to me. But he said, Becky, for the first time, I read this great article talking about, let's talk about not these risks that have been blown out of proportion by a study, by medications we don't even use anymore. Let's look at the wellness profile and what hormone replacement has done in the wellness category, how we are heart healthy better by sometimes 50 to 75%. Our bone health, our brain health. And these are studies not now being, before it was like all these studies are in Europe because Europe's way ahead of us as always. But now those studies have been done in the United States. I've listened to some wonderful cardiologists with what it does for our heart health. And just for a fact that most people don't think about, everybody comes in and their first fear is, am I going to get breast cancer from hormone replacement therapy? Their first fear should be, when am I going to die from heart disease? Because 1 in 3 women die from heart disease. Right. That's huge. Mm-hmm. That's the question that we should be asking our gynecologists and our people that are getting us through these menopausal years. It's truly significant what it does in that wellness piece.
So can you just talk briefly about what the primary hormones are that are affected during peri and menopause, and like, why are they so important? Why are we feeling the way we're feeling?
Okay, so our main hormones that we have in our body are our trifecta, our estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone. Estrogen is absolutely the most significant hormone in a female. It does 400 jobs in your body every second that you're alive until menopause, until we have nothing. So we go from something that is really protective of everything in our body, physically and mentally. It has some connection to estrogen. And we go from having great levels to perimenopause, where we begin to still have regular cycles, but our quality and our amount of estrogen, regardless that we're still having regular cycles, is no longer the same. We're at much lower levels. And we begin to get very affected until menopause, when we have none. So I tell people, it's like, a warehouse for Amazon, and they have 500 people running the warehouse and mailing your packages to have in 3 days. And now all of a sudden, 400 people don't come to work the next day. What do those 100 people have to do to try in some fashion to save and do what everybody else did? That's what puts your body into such chaos, because all your other hormones, which we are run by hormones, now are truly affected and not doing their jobs as well, simply because they're trying to do and make up for everything that estrogen, testosterone didn't do. The testosterone is a big piece that we are very adamant about using, because ladies, that energy, that fatigue, that not being able to lose weight, that's your testosterone. And that testosterone, you need lean muscle mass, and you can't develop and keep your lean muscle mass without your testosterone. Where I put testosterone, if you look at your lab level and it says 3 to 36 or 45, so 45 being the highest level. Men's highest level is 1200. So look at the comparative difference. So if you ever wonder why they're a little more spunky than us, there's the reason. So when I place people based on what they are, I'm pushing to get their levels in pellet world from 80 to 200. So I'm making a significant change in what that testosterone level is. Testosterone has been used for years in females, and it has been found to be very safe with very few side effects. You have your sometimes a little acne, sometimes a little bit of extra facial hair. You don't get a beard. You don't talk with a deep voice. You don't get these male characteristics, because we're still like 1/12 of what these guys are, but it is making us feel so much better. It also is just a happy hormone. You're just happier, and it absolutely improves the libido. And the libido is important, of course, but it's these other things, the energy of what we need to get off that couch and feel motivated to go take that walk or just socialize, and getting that back along with your estrogen is absolutely restorative to how that we feel. And that's the three things that we do. Women with a uterus, progesterone is much more important because not only do we have progesterone as well as the other two, and has a lot of varying factors, can help us sleep, can be calming, can help us have a more balanced mood. But mostly when you have a uterus, that's to protect us from getting uterine cancer. You can never take estrogen without progesterone whenever you have a uterus. Recently, in the past year to year and a half, I now, even my women without a uterus or have had a hysterectomy, and those of you that have a hysterectomy, for some reason, people feel when they have a hysterectomy, they don't need hormones. You need your hormones just like anybody else. If your ovaries are removed, you need those hormones 2 weeks after you have your hysterectomy and they're removed, or in your normal menopausal phase. But now I forget where my point was with that. The progesterone. So now I actually give progesterone to all of my women, a bioidentical natural progesterone, which is an oral pill. This is very important now because studies are showing that it decreases our risk of breast cancer by 10 to 12%. To me, 10 to 12% in how much more we see breast cancer in this day and age, I think that it's very imperative. And I think that risk factor increasing for breast cancer has a lot to do with many things. One not being the estradiol that I use. There's not a study in the world that says estradiol improves that it causes breast cancer. Estrogen will always feed a breast cancer because it feeds everything. That's what makes us feel great. It doesn't exclude the uterus, but it will not put it there in the first place. And I just tell people this is an old myth that just lingers on, because you talk about losing our breast or our hair. They're two things that identify us as females, and we don't want anybody to mess with those two things. They're very important to us. So that fear kind of lingers, and I spend them every day answering that question, but I'm very confident. We do mammograms now that pick up, breast cancers that are literally smaller than a pencil tip. And we're diagnosing them, treating them as, breast cancer, as they should be. It's great they find them early, but these very early breast cancers, and again, that's a whole nother conversation, but I treat a lot of breast cancer survivors, especially with stage 0 and stage 1. And if you're terrified of estrogen, you can just use testosterone, which helps. So as you can see, there's many different ways of which this can go, but you can help women in so many ways with these 3 hormones.
So I've heard about the BRCA, the BRCA gene that they're testing for breast cancer. So if somebody comes in and they know that they have a genetic predisposition to breast cancer, what is the plan from that point with that person?
Well, a lot of it has really dependency on them being very aware of their own genetic history. I will not tell you that if they have that BRCA gene, I'm going to tell them 100% they can't use estrogen. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an estrogen positive or estrogen fed. And you have to have the abnormality before the hormones are going to feed it. I'm very regimented with my yearly mammograms. Of course, I always recommend the self-breast exams. But if somebody is truly suffering, even if you put them on estrogen for short term, they may not be somebody that wants to take it until they're 85, but they would be somebody that I wouldn't tell them, okay, well, you have to suffer because you have this risk. We all have so many unknown risks that we don't know about. And really, how many women may have that BRCA gene that we're not even aware of? And knock on wood, it's not something that we see more because the general public we're seeing more, again, I think with early diagnosis. But so I wouldn't tell them no. Definitely, let's just say, that they're terrified of that. They have that BRCA gene, their mom had breast cancer, their aunt had breast cancer. Then there are other things that we can do. There are medications that actually, a lot of the GYNs put women on an antidepressant, which I'm not in agreement of, but with somebody with that particular situation, they may be a good person to try alternative ways of making the body think that they're having more estrogen than they actually are. Their testosterone, even if you have a breast cancer survivor, we can give you testosterone with an estrogen blocker, so that because testosterone converts to estrogen eventually, but we can block that from even happening so they don't get the estrogen. So every person is a very unique individual, and that's how I treat them.
Yeah. I mean, same holds true here. People always ask me, so how many calories should I be eating and what should my macros be? And I'm like, I can't give you a straight answer because everybody's biology is different. You know, unless
Absolutely.
we're 100% identical, there's no way of, just saying this is it. So interesting. I recently heard that if you are deciding to take HRT,
Mhm.
that it should happen before the age of 60.
What I would tell you is it's within 10 years of menopause. So if you're 54, then by 64, you should have had hormone replacement therapy. And why they say that is very important is your heart protection, because that heart protection can be 50%. Sometimes now they're finding in studies that it's much higher than that, as long as you treat your body within those 10 years of menopause. That doesn't mean that I won't treat you after those 10 years. But if somebody has come to me and now they're 12 years out from menopause, I will gradually bring them back into getting used to hormones, probably more like beginning with creams at a very low dose and adapting the body. The heart is not believed to be able to take into the receptors as well after 10 years. They don't feel they're as quick to open the receptors and let that estrogen in. Yes, you'll hear that if you do that, you're going to have an increased heart attack risk. And I think, again, as long as you treat them as an individual, you're doing it in a much slower fashion. And that's the way I've done it for years, along with Dr. West. And that's worked very well for us. There are not many women that I won't place on. They come to me and they're 92. Okay, well, I may have a little thought on that. But, pretty much into their older years. I mean, just to kind of step back because, like I know that you all have particular symptoms that you have. A lot women are all about our weight. We know this is a changing time. Our body is disproportioned in ways that hasn't been before. Some of it is physiological. It just happens. We all get that upper belly. That's a physiological change. It's where the fat disperses. It goes into our bodies. We don't have a lot of control of that, but we can still control it with exercise and diet, of course. But we have weight gain. You have irritability, mood changes. We don't sleep. We're anxious, and we've never been anxious before. We're depressed. We have vaginal dryness. We have pain with intercourse. There are so many women over the age of 50 that are having that intercourse with their partners because they love them. And sadly, they're very miserable. They're in pain. And it's because that vagina, from not having that estrogen, goes from being a big, fluffy, kind of soft and comfortable space to basically being tissue paper. And that's how thin it actually becomes.
Wow.
And basically what happens when they're active is they're tearing that tissue. Those are medical issues. That's why I always say menopause is not a syndrome. It's not something we go through. We are menopausal to the day we're 6 feet under. It
Right.
simply means our ovaries don't work. We don't have the hormones, and they're never coming back. So you can't have a hot flash and they stop and you're better. And many women define menopause by whether they have a hot flash or not. That's not even a thin stripe on the top of the cake. I mean, but that's the one that can be most noticeable. So all these symptoms, that energy, that fatigue, libido, that you could care less, you'd rather clean the bathroom than have sex with your partner. I mean, those are all hormone generated. You don't really, almost don't have that control. You want it, but you don't care.
Mhm.
So these are all those symptoms that you're out there that you don't even realize you're having and is related to hormones, but really is.
So what are your thoughts on most women being on HRT, even if their symptoms aren't debilitating? Should it be something still to consider?
I would love for women to think that there isn't an alternative, that it should be something just like if your thyroid is abnormal, we don't sit around and say, well, my thyroid's not working well because I'm old. We're going to get a normal medication and we're going to take that back into optimal range. We shouldn't be thinking any differently with female hormones than we are any other hormone, and society shouldn't be looking at it as being anything different. These are the things that make us feel vital. So even if you're not having hot flashes, there's things about you that you sit down, and if I gave you my list, you'd circle them, but you don't think about it, but you'd realize, oh, I do have that. I'm more depressed. I don't want to be as social as I used to be. I'm too tired to get off the couch. These are all not because you're old and you're aging. I mean, I'm 61. I am not old. I feel fantastic. And that's the way we should be feeling at this age. And that's because you have that balance. So, and we talked about the heart, the bone, the brain. These all significantly have receptors for estrogen and testosterone that protects us from these diseases. Even if you have no symptom at all, hormones were put out on the market in the first place for wellness and health, not for symptoms. It just happened to be icing on the cake was it took care of our symptoms.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So we were talking a little bit, or you touched a little bit on the insurance aspect. How does that work?
Typically, when you come into my office specifically, we do a consult on every person. So we ask them to have lab work before they come in to see us, because then we have all of those results to have that discussion and be able to talk about a treatment plan. The consult itself, and typically 90% of these insurance companies are covering your lab work. It is something that is typically covered. I don't hear very often it's not. The consult we send in to your insurance company, and that is typically covered, here and there, your deductible and all those things that we have to know for each of our own insurances. Pellet insertions is what, when you come in and let's say you decide to do pellets, the insertion will sometimes, by probably 35 to 40% of insurances will pay for that pellet insurance. For that pellet insertion, but probably 60% or more insurance does not cover them. So the pellets themselves are never covered. Did I lose you, Michelle?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay, there you are. So the pellets themselves are compound, so they're never covered. They're $35 a piece for the estrogen, $35 for the testosterone. The progesterone is typically an oral medication we let you get through your pharmacy, although it's still bioidentical. And the way I tell women, basically when you're done with us, it's $270 for your pellets, and that's every 12 weeks. And I tell women, you have to look at this as, think about how many times we go to Target in a 3-month period of time. It's $100 a month for you to be healthy and well, and be that supportive and caring person and taking care of all those people we all know we have to take care of till the end of time. And we need what we have to be healthy. Using creams or patches, we follow you for several months relatively closely together. We make sure that you're having symptom relief. And then basically once you get on creams or patches, you can really go out like a year, as long as you're doing your annuals and your mammograms. And so they're all different variances. And, people always say to me, what do you recommend? And, if you're given that perfect candidate from, 45 to 65, very honestly, and we're these women that are still powerhouses and our life's no different than when we were 40. I always tell them, I'm honest in what I believe and what I see every day. And pellets, yes, that's my business, but it's my business because I'm so passionate about it. And for that simple cost for me for 3 months, it's just essential. I was 3 weeks late yesterday. And I'm going to tell you, the last 3 weeks of my life, and I've been doing this for 18 years. So I don't really think about it. I've got very steady levels. But my husband, we were away, and I'm sure that I was just shorter than normal. And I was much, much more emotional in like the stresses with the business. And he said, now, I don't want to say this in an unkind way, but do you need your pellets? And I was like, I said, I don't know. And I came back to the office and I was 3 weeks late for my pellets.
Wow.
And I'm going to tell you, even 24 hours later, I've lost that edge of irritability. I feel my energy coming back. And by 36 hours, I feel like I normally do. So it's amazing.
Yeah. My biggest struggle over the last year, once I got through like the hot flashes and the anxiety and stress, although there was also other stuff, for me, it's been recovery. So I'm sure that is having to do with my testosterone levels specifically. But, who knows? I mean, I had that Dutch test done and all of my hormones are in the toilet, my sex hormones. So it's just interesting. And how do you feel about that whole Dutch test versus just getting regular blood work done?
I am standardized in some senses. I definitely, I don't really have anything against any testing that somebody looks at, but I'm purely like that blood level tells me what's in your blood. And that's standardly what I do. There are different variant tests that people will do. Some people do urine, but I have traditionally just stuck with doing blood work. I think they're very true like levels, and you're going to see really true levels with pellet therapy because it's gone directly into the blood. Okay. Sometimes creams and patches, you aren't going to see quite as good as a level because it's got to go through your skin and your bowel and sometimes your stomach. And so you don't get that. Whereas that pellet is a direct right into the blood supply. So that's why that you can measure them as easily as you do. So how somebody tests, I mean, I by nature just have them get blood tests before that they see me.
But like your hormones are fluctuating at all times during the day. So how do you know when to get your blood work done?
Pretty much when you're perimenopausal and when you're perimenopausal, you can definitively see the change in somebody's hormones. Specifically, you're going to see their highest at the peak, like ovulation. And then you're going to look at them the first day of their menses. That's going to show you that variance scale. Like a lot of perimenopausal women feel okay about a week before their period because they're at their highest level. Okay. But then as they're dropping down and then till they recover that week after their period, 3 out of the 4 weeks, they're not feeling well. And you can see that drop and you become much more sensitive to those lower levels. When you're menopausal, there's no fluctuation of anything. You're just empty.
Let me ask you this. When I was probably 42, 43, I said to my OBGYN, don't you think that I should get like baseline hormone testing done just to see what's normal for me? And she's like, no,
do that. They never look. They don't want to look. They don't want to see it because they know where you'll be in menopause. You won't be anywhere. You won't have any hormones. Right. And in perimenopause, they're just telling you perimenopause is a tough 10 years to live through, but they're not reacting to it.
Isn't it important to kind of know what's normal for you?
You and I think that, yes.
So what age do you think women should get, have their hormones tested?
Hormones begin to deplete at the age of 35, as early as 35.
Wow.
So you will definitely begin to see those changes, see that PMS get worse. Some women become from PMS to PMDD because their levels are lower. Now they're really kind of dropping down to almost nothing around that period time. So there is a lot of changes from 35 on. A lot of women won't recognize it till their late 40s, but some people are very sensitive to those changes and they'll begin to notice that big dip. A lot of women with PMS and PMDD very early in life, it's because they just have a high estrogen ovulation and boom, it just drops straight down with their period. And those are the women that have a lot of these headaches before their periods, severe breast tenderness. So those are a lot of things that are literally just related to their estrogen just quickly leaves their body. And obviously in menopause, like I said, there is no fluctuation. It is what it is. It's empty. You should have normal for optimal levels for the estradiol should be 100 to 400. And women that are menopausal are less than 20. So they're nowhere near where that number should should be. And I explain all that so you know where optimal levels should be and where that yours are now in comparison to where they should be if you want to feel like that optimal person that you felt like when you were 30 to 35. And
Yeah.
just like I always go back to the thyroid, well, they don't say, well, you're 62, so I'm going to give you half the dose I would give you because you're old. Well, you'd go to another endocrinologist.
Right.
So, you know, but the GYNs just kind of put this off. And everybody asked me why, and I wish I knew the answer of why they can't
They're
open their
not
mind.
educated. I think that they're not super educated. Like there should be, and actually, I don't know if you're familiar with NAMS.
Yes.
At least those are women that are OBGYNs that are well versed, hopefully,
Yes.
in taking care of women that need to be taken care of in that regard. Although I did have a client who actually her doctor was on that website and she would not test her blood.
Yeah.
So I
And
think,
none of my traditional guys, they won't look at them.
well, of course the guys won't.
Well, the women don't either.
Oh.
And I'm sad to make that like statement.
Yeah.
And sometimes when female physicians have never used treatment and they've gone through menopause, you kind of have that, well, I did it.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't do it because they're still doing it, right?
Exactly.
Because there is no end to it. They've just, we all sadly adapt to even when they're not good changes. Women are great chameleons.
Oh,
We
yeah.
change to what we need to change to.
Yeah.
And if that means we're somewhat unhappy, we're still going to make things work for everybody else.
Yeah.
We're the glue. So the glue has to keep on working.
So I did get a question.
Okay.
Christina, she's asking, are the pellets of each hormone or just testosterone?
It's the estradiol, it's the testosterone, so that's 2, and the progesterone is in oral form. We finally have had an oral progesterone now made into a pellet. I'm not going to say it was overly successful. I told them they need to go back to the drawing board. I did use it on my patients for a period of time, but did not get the results that I wanted to see. I didn't see the lab levels I wanted. The pellet was not what I wanted it to be. It just wasn't as adaptable as my other pellets. So I've kind of removed myself from them until they go back to the drawing board. So that is usually in oral form. But the beauty of that, even when you just get started with your hormones, the progesterone you take at bedtime because it can make you tired. And sometimes when you're missing that estrogen and waiting for it to work, it can help you sleep.
There you go, Christina. Could take care of your sleep issues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that estrogen will definitely help with your insomnia.
Yeah,
I mean, women come back and see us about 6 weeks after they repeat their blood work so we can show them the numbers and how they have changed.
Yeah.
This isn't a voodoo. This is your body sending a message, and I can't make that up. And when those numbers are better, guess what? Instead of crying in my office, you're smiling in my office.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful success for me every time I see that.
And honestly, that's how, so you and I connected through Kathy Sikorsky, who was a client of mine. And we had spoken a little bit about it. And I had another client who was just, it was more, she wasn't sleeping, but her mood was just like, and I could tell when she would walk into the gym, she'd be just have this look of like, I'm going to rip somebody's head off. And I sent her to you, and she said within like a couple weeks, she felt tremendously better.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, then after that all happened, COVID hit, and I wasn't able to see you. So there are people from all over the place, not necessarily in the tri-state area. So what do you recommend for people that can't come see you?
There are pellet people now really everywhere. You basically, in the state that you're in, you look for providers who have pellet hormone replacement therapy, and you should be able to pick up providers in your area. I'm not going to say there's a lot of them in a lot of smaller states or smaller cities. There are not a lot of people. I have people come from many areas simply because there are not a lot of providers. But even if you're out of state, educate yourself about perimenopause, menopause. Go to somebody who knows and understands what I consider this disease process. And if they don't have pellets, what they can do. Any HRT is better than no HRT, because they're all going to help you effectively in your wellness and also for some of your symptoms. So, if pellets are not an option and you're in another state, there are options out there. And certainly, you can go on to what's called, I don't know if I can say their name legally, but well, I'll pass that on to Michelle, and then she can tell you, and you can actually look for a provider in your area. But I don't think I can say that legally, so I don't think I will. But so yes, I mean, and this has grown tremendously. Dr. West, when he began this 25 years ago, he was the only provider on the East Coast.
Wow.
So now you probably have honestly thousands.
Well, I've also heard you have to be careful about where you're choosing to go.
Oh, you indeed do. Make sure that this person has background. They just didn't, because any physician or any nurse practitioner can go and learn to do pellets. But you want to make sure that you have someone that has that background, has that experience. And listen, just ask people that see them. I mean, my business is built on referrals.
Yeah.
We've never, gotten to the point yet that we can put those big billboards up. And honestly, my patients have been my beautiful system in growing my practice. And honestly, isn't that the best way to grow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. For sure.
And please tell them, it's all about how we take care of ourselves too. I mean, there is, as Michelle and I were kind of talking in the beginning of things that you can do for sleep and because pellets or any hormone doesn't fix everything. We still are aging. You have to take care of yourself. Good, healthy diet, which we all know what that is. We've heard it a million times. It's trying to institute it, make it part of your lifestyle, and have people to help you, to support you. Trying to do something alone is just frustrating and unfortunately not usually successful. Reaching out for that support is a huge piece of all of this. So all those healthy things that you read about and do, and there are many supplements, which again, like I could do a lot of these. There are so many different legs to this, because for me, it's not just about hormones. It's about taking care of women in this age group. Absolutely. And I'm so passionate about that in many different areas. And I hope eventually that I can grow into more of those areas where I can have more time. But this is my true passion. I mean, hormones is what I live for every day. I work 60, 70 hours a week doing at 61 years old, but I'm not looking at retirement. That's not something I really think about.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yep. When you're passionate about what you do, it's not really work.
It's exactly right.
It's stressful, but it's not really work.
Right. It can be stressful. That I agree with.
For sure. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and all of your knowledge. I think, it's something that I want to keep pushing out there into this world. I'm trying to personally grow my Facebook group because I put a ton of content out there, mostly with regard to lifestyle changes and information in that regard. But there's always little nuggets that I pick up from either NAMS or that Genev company. I don't know if you've heard of them. I'm sure you have. Yeah. So there's always good articles that are being written. And well,
and I tell you, if women really they just don't know what to think, it is worth that time to have that conversation, whether it be with me or somebody else who is educated and well-versed in this. Have that conversation. Look at your numbers. Your numbers tell you so much. And then to be educated on where we are and what that we need to ultimately have the healthiest life going forward. Even if you decide not to do something, that's your choice as an individual, but you can make a better decision when you're well educated about it.
100%, 100%. And I'm gunning for 100, so I'm going to be fine.
Well, I thank you all for taking the time and listening to me as well.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
And I will be putting this recording. Let me know if you want me to send it to you. I